And now let me say something kind of weird. Now I'm going to throw it over to you, Matt, for our top story this evening.
Good evening, Kobe. Good evening, Josh. Hello, everyone. As Kobe said, get involved with the show, get your comments in, and we'll get to them as we go. And we'll start with the top story this evening, which is Formula 2. And with our Grid Encore team on a well-deserved off-season break, we're going to recap the 2024 Formula 2 Championship battle and the highlights of the season on the show tonight. Entering the season finale at the weekend in Abu Dhabi, the championship came down to two drivers, Brazilian Gabriele Bortoleto and Frenchman Isaac Hadjar. Bortoleto was a McLaren development driver through the season, who ended up signing a multi-year deal to graduate to Formula One next year with Sauber, which of course will evolve into Audi Formula One in 2026. Hadjar, on the other hand, is the Red Bull Junior driver looking to potentially claim a seat in the Visa Cash App RB next year, although that team name will be changing yet again for 2025. After the Abu Dhabi sprint race, which was won by Paul Aron on the weekend, Bortoleto led the championship by 4.5 points over Hadjar. So it came down to the feature race on Sunday morning before the Grand Prix. Unfortunately for Hadjar, he ran into trouble right at the start when his car would not go anywhere off the grid and it had a stalled engine. That basically ended his championship hopes as Bortoleto became the 2024 F2 champion. In a year where we saw lots of parity across the grid, Bortoleto was consistent throughout the season with plenty of points finishes, 8 podium finishes, 2 feature race wins to his name as well at the Red Bull Ring in Austria and in Baku. Fernando Alonso, whose company represents Bortoleto, said the young Brazilian driver may not have the same car as others in next year's highly touted rookie class, but in Formula One, but he believes that he's the best driver amongst the group. Graphic on screen courtesy of Formula 2. So, guys, what do we think of Bortoleto's championship winning season? And do you agree with Alonso that Bortoleto is the best in class? Josh, start with you.
Good evening, Matt. Good evening, Kobe. Yeah, I think Bortoleto has had a fantastic season in Formula 2. He's come in as the Formula 3 champion. He's won them both now as a rookie. And he came in immediately and front row with teammate Kushmaini in Bahrain qualifying for the Shakir round. Brilliant start. Won on an opening weekend, which was fantastic. He's had, I think, 3 victories this season in what has been a very competitive year. I've seen a couple of people saying, well, he's only had a couple of race wins this year. How's that a defining of a champion? He's been consistent. He's been inside the points. He's been making his way with overtakes, left, right, and centre. Brilliant strategies as well. And we had 18 different winners this season in Formula 2 in a 28-round championship. He's one of the few that have been multiple race winners alongside Oliver Bearman, who also gets to step up. So I think Bortoleto is very much a driver who is going to shine. And I know he's going to spend a year with Sauber and then he gets the brand new Audi deal. Now, Audi have come in very much all bells and whistles. We know that the current car isn't great. That's because it hasn't been designed by them. They're coming in for 26 with all muscle, and he's going to be a very, very, very important bullet for that gun to be fired when we get going in, I think it's Bahrain in 2026 as a season opener. So I'm very much looking forward to that. But in terms of next season, I don't see much happening with that car. It'll very much be a parallel of this year. Zhou and Valtteri improved towards the latter half of the season, especially Zhou, who as soon as he knew he wasn't going to be racing in 2025, suddenly he could make it out of Q1 in successive races and had one of his best qualifyings, Vegas, and then over as well in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, the car's not going to be great. It'll be another carbon copy of this year because, of course, the regulations will... it's the final year of this set, so everybody's supposed to close up a little bit, but they were already so far behind their nearest competitor, which was Williams, and Williams are going to have a step up next year as well. They don't care about 25 either, so it's very much a holding year, and I think that's going to be good for him because he's only 2 seasons in to this level of single-seater. So I think a year in Formula One to get used to the ropes, just what he needs.
Yeah, for sure. And got a comment here from Adam Limmer saying that Formula 2 is incredible and the racing is sensational. Plenty of time. Totally agree, Adam. Formula 2 is actually one of my favorite racing series to cover here at Grid Network outside of the main racing series that we cover in the grid ranking, plus the sports car racing side of things with IMSA and the World Endurance Championship. I think Formula 2 is a remarkable championship. And really, I'm always excited to see the talent that comes through this particular series because they either end up in Formula 1, Formula E, IndyCar, or sports cars. There's definitely a lot of great talent out there in this class. But getting back to the question you asked, Matt, I think Gabriel Bortoleto definitely had a solid season. Well deserved championship run, and looking forward to seeing what he can do with his Formula One career long term. And Josh bring up a good point about the Sauber for next year. We know Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu did the best they could in this car this year, but it was just not a good car at all. And you could put the fastest driver in that Sauber, and they probably wouldn't do much better than what we saw from those two drivers this year. You could put Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Norris in that car, and they would struggle all year long to find something. So I think Bortoleto's rookie season is probably going to be a difficult one. See what him and Nico Hulkenberg can do next year, but maybe they'll surprise us as we saw this past season in Formula One. They just finished up. We saw quite a bit of surprise. I thought Max was going to completely run away with the whole thing until McLaren and others end up catching up. So I guess anything is possible. And I'm also not surprised that Fernando Alonso, who is Bortoleto's representative, would tout his driver. It's obvious he's going to tout his driver and be like, he's the best rookie in next year's class. I think next year's rookie class is going to be spectacular. In the last few years, it seemed like it's gotten kind of dull and stale. With the talent on the grid, it'll be like the same ones have been there. And next year, we're going to see a lot of fresh faces and new faces in new places. And I think that's much needed for Formula One right now. And with all the rookies we have coming in next year, it's going to be really exciting to see how they do. And Bortoleto, I think he's definitely going to be handicapped next year by that Sauber. But who knows? Maybe Fernando Alonso will be right. And out of all the great rookies we have coming in 2025, Bortoleto might end up being the best. But as of right now, I think it's really hard to say. But I probably wouldn't bet that Bortoleto is going to be the best because you have Antonelli, Doohan, Behrman, others could have had job we're going to talk about in just a little bit, but definitely a lot to be excited about, with a few F2 drivers who are moving up to the pinnacle of motorsport in 2025.
You took the words right out of my mouth about Alonso saying what he said about Bortoleto this week. That's typical Fernando, isn't it? For me, he's had a great year, but very similar to what he did in Formula 3 last year. Wasn't setting the world alight, and then comes home with the championship at the end, just nicely consistent all the way through. And we were probably sat here on this show this time last year with no changes to the F1 driver roster, going, oh, maybe Formula 2 is a bit broken. And now we're going to get a good crop of rookies coming up to Formula 1 next year, which is great to see. Let's have a look at the man that didn't quite grab the championship at the weekend. That is Isack Hadjar. Had a very strong season despite the stall at the start of the feature race on Sunday morning, costing him a chance to go wheel to wheel with Bortoleto for the championship. He won feature races in Melbourne, Imola, Silverstone and Spa throughout the first half of the season and looked like he might be odds on for the championship at the summer break. 4 wins, double that of Bortoleto through the year. The next thing for Hadjar is to wait and see what happens at Red Bull, of course, with its driver lineup for 2025. Sergio Perez widely expected to be dropped for next year, as Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda hope to become Max Verstappen's teammates in 2025. This would open the door for the Frenchman to race in the pinnacle of motorsports with the Visa Cash App RB team. Guys, has Hadjar done more than enough to prove that he's deserving of an F1 seat? Kobe, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think Isack Hadjar has absolutely done more than enough to warrant an F1 drive next season. And like you've been saying, there's a lot going on with Red Bull. We know that Sergio Perez's representatives, Red Bull, they were planning to have a meeting after Abu Dhabi to decide his future. Maybe his future has already been decided, but it just hasn't been made public yet. And it would be interesting if that news would come out between now and next Wednesday night, because we'll be able to bring it to you here at Grid Tonight rather than it happening over the Christmas holiday break, and then we have to wait till after the New Year to come back. But yeah, Red Bull is continuing to weigh its options and see what's best. But regardless, if Sergio Perez gets dropped, and they want to move up one of their Visa Cash App RB drivers, that would obviously make it very easy for Isack Hadjar to slide into that spot. I think he's done a remarkable job this year in Formula 2. And if it wasn't for, that unfortunate incident at the very start of the feature race where he stalled, I think he really would have given Gabriel Bortoleto a run for his money for this championship. It's unfortunate, that the championship came down to a situation like that and he wasn't able to, go go head to head with Bortoleto on the track there at the end. But I think Red Bull would be making a really good decision to have him drive for Visa Catch Up RB in 2025.
Yeah, we've talked about over the weekend how it was a shootout in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix between Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson for who's replacing Sergio Perez. Isaac Hadjar very much had to prove himself in the F2 weekend, and he got mecha chromed. Let's be honest. It was absolutely ridiculous what happened to him. To lose it at the line, literally through no fault of his own. The F2 Mechachrome engines are a joke, and they're only in Formula 2 because the big boss of Formula 2, used to work for Mechachrome and has very close ties with them. So that's the only reason they're there, very much so. So I don't like it. I really don't. We need an engine that can run. Here's an idea. Alpine are leaving Formula 1. Renault are leaving Formula 1. Get Renault engines inside these F2 cars and get them sponsoring it. Because we can't keep on. This year has been an absolute embarrassment. The cars just clonk out for no reason. They stall. They don't fire up. And also, if they spin, they choke. And that's it. They're gone. You're out of the race due to a spin. You get taken out by somebody, knocked around. That's it. You're out. No fault of your own. It's ridiculous. It's an absolute joke. So that's for Isaac Hadjar to have that happen in a championship-defining moment. There are no excuses. So definitely 110%, Isaac Hadjar has proved he deserves an F1 seat. And I think the majority of the F2 field this season has done that, because for once we've seen the talent that they've all got at one time. It feels like a classic GP2 season, like in 2005, 2006, when we had Rosberg, Hamilton, and all that lot coming through as well. Nakajima at one point. I think it's only logical that they make their step up to F1 next year, and I'm very much ready, because I was very critical the fact that there was no rookies on the grid this season, and I'm so happy that we got some throughout the year. So going to next season with 6, possibly 7, yes, please. That's fantastic news for Formula 1. It needs a breath of fresh air. It needs new blood, and it desperately needs new competition. And we're starting to happen now with Piastri, Norris, Leclerc, Hamilton coming back into it. But it's getting good now.
Yeah, and if Hadjar does come up to the top table of Formula 1, maybe we can get a French Grand Prix back on the calendar as well. Adam says one more thing: Sebastian Montoya going to F2. We'll talk. There's been plenty of F2 announcements, and Kobe's got them all, well, pretty much all of them, to tell you about when we get to the news segment later on in the show. One team that wasn't as competitive this year as we've seen in previous seasons was Prema. They had Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Bearman on their books this year, and we know both of them are on their way to Formula 1 next year. Kimi Antonelli replacing Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, and Oliver Bearman, who has, of course, driven in a few Grand Prix this year already. He'll be alongside Esteban Ocon at Haas in 2025. Antonelli won the Silverstone Sprint Race and Hungary Feature Race this year and finished 6th in points, while Bearman finished 12th in the points. He won the Austria Sprint Race, Monza Sprint Race, and Qatar Sprint Race. But of course, he missed a lot of races because he was doing Formula 1. Prema finished 5th in the team's championship this year. Was this year's performance from Prema, guys, mostly due to them struggling with this new F2 car, as Josh has kind of documented before, or was it Antonelli and Bearman failing to meet the high expectations?
I definitely don't think it was Antonelli or Bearman failing to live up to expectations. This regulation deeply hurt Prema. They struggled in pre-season testing. They struggled in Bahrain, and they sort of got that together midway through. We saw Bearman and Antonelli taking victories in circuits that suited their car. But I think the biggest surprise was Silverstone. They didn't expect to win there, and Antonelli got a race win. So we've seen the performance of Bearman in Formula 1 in both, 3 races now? So we've had him in... Yeah, so we've had him in a Ferrari and 2 with Haas, and each time he's been super fast. Like right off the back, he's been quick. So definitely he's good. Definitely that's fine. Antonelli, he was supposed to do FP. He did did he do FP1 testing in Mercedes this weekend? No, I don't think he did he?
Oh, he was ill, wasn't he?
He was ill, yeah. He was supposed to, but didn't. And he didn't do his final F2 season. He did do the testing on Tuesday, which I was going to cover, but woke up at 5 a.m., found out there was no blog, no text, nothing. So I thought, oh, the wrap up show at the end of the day, nothing, not one piece of information. Actually, I think I saved the time, so I can tell you where he was, because Antonelli did a day in that car. I can. Russell in the Mercedes did a 123.789 and finished in third position. Antonelli finished fifth on a 123.873. So there was only less than a tenth of a second between them. So really good for Antonelli to step up that quickly into a seat, really. Leclerc topped it though, 123.510. But it was quite quick. It was a good day. And for instance, to give you a sort of example of where everybody else was, Behrman did do a test. I can't see him. Browning was 11th. Hadjar was 15th. Tsunoda 17th. Bortoleto 18th. Crawford 20th. Dragovic 21st. Vesti 22nd. Antonio Fulco was 23rd. So they're quick. These guys are quick. And it's very much just showing that the Prema car this year for F2 and quite a lot of the F2 cars struggled with these new engines. And the only reason we've seen the likes of Mawassa and Luke Browning be fast, and even Joshua Dirtsgen, brilliant example for AIX, a team that were rebranded midway through the season, were absolutely nowhere throughout half the year. Dirtsgen had an engine failure, got a brand new spanking engine from Mechachrome, and all of a sudden he's blitzing everybody and right at the front of the field. It is so unbalanced, Formula 2, with those engines. It is ridiculous. And it's sort of holding everybody back. If everybody had a fresh engine at segments in the season, you would see a vastly different Formula 2. And you would see the true pace of Antonelli, Behrman, Hadjar, Bortoleto. They would be at the front all the time. And I mean, even add in Paul Aron to that mix.
Yeah, Josh, totally agree with everything you said. I don't really have much more to add. But yeah, it was definitely a surprise to see Prema, have the struggles that we saw this year, because they're usually the gold standard, of these feeder categories all across motorsports. And we expect to see Prema, up there fighting for the team's championship and for race wins on any given race weekend, especially when you have talents like Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman. Heading into this season, I thought they were going to be 1-2 in the championship. And when you look at where they finished, 6th and 12th, a lot of people will wonder, why would Formula One teams, want a driver who's finishing 6th and 12th in the championship instead of towards the top of the standings? But like you were saying, with all the issues that we saw, with the engine and the F2 car in general, I guess the results that we've seen this year from Antonelli and Behrman have been highly misleading. So if Prema was in his typical form, we probably would have seen Antonelli and Ollie Behrman, perform a lot better than what we saw. And specifically focusing on Antonelli, I think a lot of people, really expected him to come in, just blow everyone doors off. Well, not doors, but these open wheel cars. But you get what I'm saying. Expect him to come in and dominate the competition, as he has done at every single level of his racing career. But I think that this year was, good for him. Character building year where you're not the guy out there who's out there dominating, winning all these races and in control of the championship. Because next year when he goes to F1 with Mercedes, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on him, a lot of pressure on this generational talent, probably the most talented young driver to enter Formula One since a young 16-year-old Max Verstappen moved up to the pinnacle of motorsport. So a lot of people are probably wondering, should Antonelli have gotten a second season in Formula 2 since he is so young and skip Formula 3 altogether, or was it best for him to just go to F1 now with Mercedes? And some people even said maybe he should go to Williams maybe for a year or two. But Toto Wolff says, hey, we probably made a mistake by keeping George Russell at Williams too long, and we probably should have moved up sooner. So I guess they wanted to correct a so-called wrong by moving Antonelli up to the Mercedes senior team just like that, instead of let him, run with a team that's not as quick as Mercedes. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, how both of these young drivers do in Formula One next year, and if Prema will bounce back in 2025 with its new driver lineup, which I'll talk about in my segment during our straight news. And also, guys, I wanted to bring up an additional point related to the F2 car. I don't know if you guys saw Marshall Pruitt's article yesterday on Racer.com, but apparently IndyCar team owners have been able to see the renderings of the new 2027 IndyCar that's going to replace the current one. So, yep, there's going to be a new IndyCar in 2027. I don't know if you want to celebrate yet, Josh, but because it was, it wasn't met with all great reviews from the owners, they basically said that it looks almost like a spin image of what we currently have, but the only major difference is that the rear wing of the Indy car is almost a replica of the F2 car. So there's that.
Don't forget when we last changed the IndyCar, we had other manufacturers with renders, and half of them looks absolutely terrible. So it got okay in the end. On Prema, interesting to see what happens next year with them, because of course they've got their IndyCar program, so we're going to take some focus away from their F2 and F3 stuff. I don't think it will, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. They did start poorly and then got better throughout the season, and I feel like every time we have an F2 change in terms of the car, there is a dominant team that then we don't see much. ART was the classic example. Josh, you mentioned GP2 before, when Rosberg, Hamilton, Hulkenberg all won with ART in the early days of GP2, and then in the next generation they weren't the power team for a little while. It took them a little while to come through. Then Prema came in and won with Leclerc straight off the bat before Russell won with, I think Russell won with ART, didn't he? So if memory serves. So going to be interesting to see what Prema can do in terms of them bouncing back next year. Let's round out the F2 segment with an F2 hots and knots from the year. Our biggest thumbs ups and biggest thumbs down from the season. Kobe, we'll start with you.
Oh, well, I'm gonna start off with the driver that was the biggest surprise to me, and then the biggest disappointment. I guess the biggest surprise to me in Formula 2 this season, although he didn't complete the year, was definitely Franco Colapinto. I didn't expect to see a driver like Colapinto. Like at the time when he was in Formula 2, obviously he ran really well in F3 and in the other categories coming up. I looked at what he did there, and he wasn't, like the outright best, but he was pretty consistent, pretty fast. Like, yeah, he belongs in this series, but I never got a he's a Formula One driver type of prospect. And when Williams announced they were sacking Logan Sargent, replacing with Colapinto, I know the reaction within our team here at Grid Network and all across social media. A lot of people are like, who is this? Because they don't cover Formula 2, so they're like, who is Franco Colapinto? We don't even have any idea who this driver is. And looking at his performances in F2 up to this point, yeah, he was running solid, but he didn't really give me the Formula One driver type of vibe. So for him to come out of Formula One like that and have come out of Formula 2 and then have a red hot start to his Formula One career was just absolutely amazing to see what he was able to do in that Williams in such a short time, which I actually landed him on Red Bull shortlist to potentially get in their driver lineup for 2025. But after that red hot start, Colapinto really cooled off big time to end the 2024 season, with some mistakes and some crashes. And then once Red Bull saw that, they were like, yeah, maybe we don't want to hire him for next season. Yeah, so at the end of the season, Colapinto really started to look like the driver that I thought we were going to see when they announced that Logan Sargent was being replaced. Unfortunate for him, because now it doesn't look like he's going to be on the grid in 2025. So we'll see what happens with him. Does he go to sports car racing? Will Williams bring him on as a reserve driver? Will another team bring him on as a reserve driver? I'm sure Colapinto will have some options out there to fill his calendar for 2025 and try to get on the F1 grid full time in 2026. So yeah, I thought Franco Colapinto was definitely one of my biggest surprises. He wasn't really flashy. Didn't give off the vibes of that he's going to be this really great driver at the pinnacle of motorsport. And then here he goes, tears it up at the start of his F1 career. Like, wow, I did not expect that. It makes me wonder about some of the other F2 drivers, who are deeper in the standings, like maybe 6th through 10th or even 11th through 15th. Will we see one of those guys, hop in an F1 car and impress? Who really knows these days? Because we've seen time and time again, drivers in F2 will be in the top 5 in the stand. They'll get the F1, then they'll completely flop and, turn into a driver that we did not expect. And biggest disappointment on the list, I don't want to say Kimi Antonelli at all. I don't, because I did expect a little bit more from him, considering what he's done in the other junior category. But as reasons, that Josh and myself talked about with the car, I guess we'll excuse that for now, and we'll see how he gets along at Mercedes. If we'll find out soon enough if Mercedes made the right decision to promote him to Formula One this quickly, or if they should have left him in F2 another year, or even stuck him at Williams before getting that call up. But I'm going to give the biggest disappointment to Ritomo Miyata. Yeah, and we'll talk about him a little bit later in the show, because he's getting another opportunity in Formula 2. I'll let you know what team later on. But honestly, expected a whole lot from this driver, because if you look at his resume, it is super, super impressive. He's basically won all of the major open wheel racing championships, all the way up to Super Formula in Japan. And when you're a driver of that caliber, I won't say I expect him to be in contention for the F2 championship, but I certainly expected to see a lot better than 19th in the standings, which is not good at all if you want to be in Formula 2. And I believe he was like one of the worst drivers in the standings who ran every single race throughout this year. So I totally thought Ritomo Miyato would definitely show why he was a super Formula and a super GT champion over in Japan. And maybe he just needed this year to get used to this style of racing. And in 2025, maybe he'll turn it on and be this highly touted prospect from Japan that we thought he could be. But it just goes to show you that, that racing in Formula 2 is not easy. It's really hard.
Really, really is. And this year, with 18 different winners out of 28 races, it really has been quite competitive. I don't have a driver of the year because there've been so many, as I've just said. I've got a moment of the year, and it's quite role reversed. You mentioned Colapinto and Antonelli. It involves them. The abandoned sprint race at Spa, when we actually did get going for a couple of laps.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. The sheer balls you have to do to go side by side in the pouring, soaking, wet rain at Eau Rouge up the hill to Radion on the inside is insane. To do it on the outside is legendary. I will never forget that move. It's a move that I literally was going nuts for in the commentary box. Antonelli, right up against the support pit wall, downhill to Eau Rouge, kept the outside line into Eau Rouge, up the hill, had it, and then got the move complete at the top of the hill, with Colapinto on the inside going, what happened? It was brilliant, and that, I think, is one of the greatest moves I've ever seen of all time. In that one corner. Wet, Eau Rouge, low power car, that I will always remember that move, and I loved it. So that's definitely my moment of the F2 year. Low moment, definitely the start crash in Azerbaijan, in the feature race. That was terrifying. And it kind of leads on to what my overriding is these Mechachrome engines. They are terrible. They will get someone killed. They really will, because they stall by going on them. It's ridiculous. And for the clutches to slip so much and it goes into anti-stall so easily, it was a miracle that we didn't get somebody killed that day. The violence of that crash on our start line was unbelievable. And it's only a time until somebody will, have a serious injury because of it. And I'm really worried about these engines because they die mid-straight. And it's really bizarre how they are. They're so unpredictable. So, yeah, that's sort of my highs and my lows. My average moment, I think I'd actually, if you want to go good, bad, ugly, I thought this year was kind of meh, really. We had some great moments, great moments, but it was always an external fact that made them great. Oh, it's way too hot here. It's way too cold. It's wet. It's just starting to rain. This, that, and the other. There's a safety car now. If the racing was left to its own devices, it was pretty boring. And I don't know if that's because of a new car or the fact that the aerodynamic redesign just hasn't worked or the engines are rubbish. I don't know. But this year in F2, it didn't work as it was supposed to do. And I think that's sort of a surprise because we're praising the drivers. And I think this year, more than ever, the drivers have had to be more than the car. And in a way, it's benefited Formula 2. So there you go.
Yeah, which perhaps it was in the last formula of the car. It was more of what team you needed to be in, I guess, was the way forward when I talked about ART before. I think my hot of the year is that every team won a race. As you kind of said, Josh, we've had 18 different winners, and every single team won at least one race this year, which has never happened before at this level, which is just fabulous. It just shows the parity amongst teams and drivers. And on top of what you've been saying about the mechanicals and stuff, I think I have to agree with Kobe with Miata. He was the lowest in the championship that ran the whole season, as you mentioned, Kobe. He had Zane Maloney as his teammate for the bulk of the season, apart from last weekend when Zane was in Brazil. with FE, and he was going really well at the very beginning of the season. Was an early championship leader in those early rounds, Bahrain, Jeddah, Melbourne kind of a portion of the year, and you thought, oh, maybe this is going to be Zane's time, but the Rodin cars kind of fell away throughout the season, and Miata really didn't show at all. He was way off the back at times and struggling. So let's hope with a year under his belt and a change of team, which we're going to get to next year, will be better for him. But yeah, that was pretty average. And for any F2 confident people who've watched F2 for a long time, if you're beaten in the championship by this version of F2's version of Sergio Canamassas, which is Amaury Cordeel, you know you've had a pretty torrid year.
Even Cordeel won a race.
Even Cordeel won a race, so that shows the level or the disappointment of Miata's season. And F2, of course, returns with the season opening for Formula One at Melbourne Albert Park at the beginning of March, with F2 and F3, of course, all on the support bill for the Australian Grand Prix. And we'll talk about it all here on the Grid Network and on Grid Encore once the season gets going. Again, Josh, back to your normal post of host. You can kick us off with part 2 of the show.